It appears that the late insurrection of the slaves in the parishes of St. Philip, St. George, Christchurch and St. John was caused by the misrepresentation and instigation of ill-disposed persons, endeavouring to induce a belief that the slaves were actually made free, but that the manumissions were improperly withheld from them. I think it is my duty at once to remove all misconception on a subject of so great an importance for the tranquility of this colony and for the well-being of the slaves themselves. I do not mean to enter into the origin and nature of slavery, further than to prevent you from erroneously supposing that bondage is your particular lot or exclusive lot. Slavery is not the institution of any particular colour, age or country. It has ever existed and does still exist among white as well as black men in every quarter of the earth. That the blacks of Africa have countenanced slavery and, with the whites, have been its joint authors in the West Indies is a fact personally known to all of you who have come from Africa under the compulsive transfer of your person by your own countrymen by whom you were held in bondage in your native land and were there disposed of as slaves. That our humane and equitable sovereign and the British nation disapprove of the traffic in slaves from Africa is known to all, as well as that it has consequently been prohibited by the law and long since ceased. But the most wise and just men, the most humane and zealous of advocates of the abolition of the slave trade, who possess practical knowledge, and the most sincere friends of those who are actually in slavery, have considered their emancipation to be morally impracticable. What would be the fate of the old, the infirm, the sick, the helpless children, and a large proportion of your whole body, who've been brought up to depend entirely upon your masters for your subsistence, if a rash measure of general emancipation were at once to throw the mass of the slave population into a new state of society under the flattering but fallacious name of freedom? I cannot omit to express my satisfaction at a good sense and feeling of so large a proportion of you who rallied round your masters and their families, when your deluded brethren so shamefully forgot the ties of duty and gratitude where benefits have been conferred upon them. I trust, however, that the example of those whose fidelity I have just commended will save me from the painful task of using the ample powers at all times in my hands to crush the refractory and punish the guilty.
The Confessions and Deposition of James Boland, a slave belonging to the plantation called River, included in Major Oxley's examination. Who saith that Busso the ranger, King Wiltshire the carpenter, Dick Bailey the mason, Johnny the standard bearer, and Johnny Cooper a cooper, were the principal instigators of the insurrection at Bailey's, that it was in consequence of information received from Richard Sargent, who was in the habit of going to Mr. Grasset's, where he obtained from the servants the English newspapers, that he had read the papers which gave the intelligence that they were free, but that the white people would not give them their freedom, and that they must fight for their liberty in the same way that they had done at San Domingo. Saith that it was not from the ill treatment of their owners that they revolted, but alone under the idea that they had been set free by the King of England. Saith that the flag belonged to Cooper, but that Johnny carried it with his troops and was a mounted officer. Saith that Johnny Ranger, belonging to Simmons, has been for upwards of 2 months carrying summons to different parishes, and threatened that if the negroes at Bailey's did not join in setting fire to the estate, they were determined to burn down all the negro houses, as well as on the different plantations that did not follow their example. And further, deponent saith not. The examination of Edward Thomas. Examiner saith that at the time of the insurrection he was manager of the estate of the Reverend Alexander Scott of the parish of St. Philip, whereon are about 350 slaves. The crop of corn had lately been reaped, and was the largest by far he had ever remembered in Mr. Scott's corn houses. The storehouses full of yams and eddoes. This was the case throughout the island. When the news arrived that the registry bill was to be introduced into Parliament, he knew that the negroes expected it was to have the effect of making them free, and that they expected their manumissions were to be delivered them when Sir James Leith arrived. He heard, and believes that the negroes said, that the white people had sent money to England to prevent freeing them. He also saith that the information which the negroes obtain of what passes in England with regard to the colonies is truly astonishing, but it always comes to them with gross misrepresentation. He saith that many of the negroes told him, after the revolt, that they had been made to believe that the king's troops would join them, and that the men of war would fire upon the town. Examiner saith, in consequence of these circumstances, and upon good reflection and consideration, he is firmly of the opinion that the agitation of the question of the registry bill was the sole cause of the insurrection. The examination of King Wiltshire, a slave belonging to the plantation called Bailey's. This examiner saith that just before Christmas, 1815, there was a report that the negroes were to be freed, and that their freedom was to be given them by a black woman who was a queen, for whom Mr. Wilberforce acted in England. That some free coloured men, namely Cain Davis, Roach and Sargent, had told him this. That examinant had never heard of any other reason. That he does not think that the slave rose on account of any ill treatment or any want of food, having been well taken care of, but that he believes the opinion among the negroes generally was that they were to be freed. An examinant further saith that Cain Davis told him that he had seen in the English newspapers that the negroes were to be manumitted through the means aforesaid, but that it appeared that the gentlemen of this island wished to withhold their manumissions, and that therefore they must fight for it, if they did not have their freedom by Christmas.